Recently, I came across a question where I'm asking myself, which is Bitcoin a good asset to invest in right now? I asked myself this question because Bitcoin has not been performing the best comparing to, let's say, gold, because it follows the uncertainty and the fluctuation of the market, right? So, whether Bitcoin is a good asset to invest in right now, even though something like gold exists, is what I've been asking myself for quite a while. And if you are asking the same question, I will be trying to answer those questions in this video. So let's start from the beginning. What is the benefit of Bitcoin, right? Powerful groups like big banks, governments, and tech companies, they try to push towards programmable money. Why? That means that they want a future digital currency they can fully control. Keyword is control. They could freeze your account, decide what you're allowed to buy with your own money, and they get to watch every single transaction you make. Well, of course, that's uncomfortable, right? But they can't control Bitcoin, which is one good part about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is not under anything. They're not under any government, under anybody or any company whatsoever. So using Bitcoin, you'll be free, which is something that some countries dislike. Second of all is that right now we have faced a lot of crises, like the war going on and the debt problem in the US and the printing money, inflation, so on, which are making the dollar, the fiat currency, weaker than ever, right? The most used currency in the world, which is the US dollars, is getting weaker and weaker. But unlike fiat currencies, Bitcoin cannot be printed. What that means is that they cannot ever reduce the value of Bitcoin. How do you measure value? You need a comparison, right? Well, the US dollars can, when the $1 can buy lesser groceries over time, one Bitcoin, when they turn into dollars, transaction back, no matter how long it is, one Bitcoin, for example, if it equals $1 a long time ago, and you can buy one candy, even right now, even if one Bitcoin turns into $5, it can still buy one candy. What that means is that one Bitcoin will forever have the same value, because there's only 21 million of them. That's why most people can see Bitcoin in a better view when they are facing problems like de-dollarization. They want somewhere to preserve their money, and Bitcoin is actually quite a good direction to look at, because a lot of people is viewing it somewhat like gold right now as a preserved currency. So in my opinion, investing in Bitcoin actually makes quite a lot of sense right now. Why? Even though Bitcoin does fluctuate in the short term, basically it is risky in the short term, but it is one of the most independent form of currency we have today, which means there's no president, no government, there is no central banks or even a single company that can inflate it away. And that's actually very good, because during recent war news and oil prices spike, fear has made Bitcoin drop in a short time, but actually it bounced back pretty quickly. If you look at the charts of a 1 day period, it actually went up about quite a lot. And if you see the 5-day period, it actually went up as well. Well, if you see the 1 year period, it actually went down a little bit, but if you see the 5-year period, it actually went up. So what it tells you is that actually, even though in 1 year time it is not as high as its peak, because it hit its peak last year, but if you zoom it out, if you invested 5 years ago, even though it is not the fastest growth compared to 10 years ago, it is still a growth that is fairly stable. So basically, often, if you think about it, if you invest in Bitcoin in the long term, you wouldn't have to worry about like a trader. So in my opinion, even though Bitcoin has huge ups and downs and a lot of dips many times throughout a single year, even though that's the case and it fluctuates a lot, it feels like a tech stock, but it's actually something worth investing in the long term instead. And it often bounce back faster than regular stocks do as well. That pattern shows that it can act as a safe place when traditional money starts feeling unreliable, because in the long term, it bounced back faster than stocks, and is also in a growth pattern. So one logical question to ask is whether the current war or economic uncertainty is a huge concern for the long-term Bitcoin investors, or short-term. Well, wars, oil stocks, and inflation fears cause like short-term dips and volatility, but usually ends up pushing Bitcoin higher over months or years. History shows that big global crises like past wars, pandemics, and financial panics often speed up the adoption of Bitcoin over time because people are looking for alternatives to a fiat money. If you're holding for 3 to 10 years, these headlines are just temporary noises, so there's no problem to them. But if you're a short-term investor, then these might be quite concerning because it can dip pretty far, like from the peak of 126,000 all the way down to right now, which is around $74,000 per Bitcoin. But if you're investing long-term, you pull out the charts to 5 years, Bitcoin went up even though it took a nosedive from last year. Well, it makes sense that I should give you some real statistics that are going on recently about Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is trading around $73,000 to $74,000 per coin. Recent prices reported between $73,758 and $74,241 on major trackers. It touched a high near 74,363,000 earlier today and is up roughly 3 to 3.5% in less than 24 hours. So that's incredible, right? 3 to 3.5% per day. That's insane. It recently broke above 74,000, hitting a 5-week highest in 5 weeks in some report, which shows a strong buying interest in people recently. It is still below its all-time high, which is around $1,026,000 from last October, but significantly higher than earlier this year. It means that it has already bounced back from January. So big investors keep adding Bitcoin through US spot ETFs, which is an easy fund that holds Bitcoin. With steady inflow reported recently, large holders like MicroStrategy continue to buy and now owns over 700,000 coins. Well, remember, one coin has its own value and they hold about more than 700,000 coins now. And there's only 21 million in existence. Well, this US spot ETF is something like how people can invest in stocks, but they don't actually hold a stock. It is the company that holds the stock, but it's Bitcoin in this case, and you just buy their Bitcoins that they're already holding, something like that. You can ask me to explain again if it's not clear enough. Here are my own predictions. Don't have to take my word for it, it's just my prediction, okay? So in the short term, in the next few months, we can see Bitcoin move between $65,000 to $85,000 or higher. If global tension eases or more money gets printed, it tends to climb quickly, but if uncertainty continues, we might see a temporary dip, but today's momentum towards $74,000 seems to be pretty positive. So that's for the short term. But short term is a little bit hard to predict since we don't know what Trump might say with his mouth, which could largely influence stock markets and Bitcoin's fluctuations. So it's a bit hard to predict, but that's my guess. But in the long term, like towards the end of 2026 and beyond, I'm pretty bullish about Bitcoin. I wouldn't say it would be an instant climb all the way to the top, but I would say that I think the price will go up a lot in the long term. I expect Bitcoin to hit maybe around 100,000 to 150,000 by the end of 2026 and early 2027. The key reasons to why I take this guess, even though it is pretty bullish to say it, is because more countries and companies are adding Bitcoin to their reserves. Basically, they believe in Bitcoin. Many countries and companies are starting to put real trust in Bitcoin. That's why they're increasing more reserves of Bitcoin. And ongoing talks about how the US strategy Bitcoin reserves and the next halving event in 2028. So what it means is that the US actually talk a lot about buying a lot of Bitcoin as well. They're also doing a lot of buying of Bitcoin as reserve, meaning that even the US believes strongly on in Bitcoin, and you know what that means. And the second thing is halving, halving. Halving actually means the supply gets cut in half. Bitcoin prices have historically jumped big after every halving, so that is a good sign. It means that Bitcoin price will jump. It's basically like splitting a stock in half, if you know what I mean. Now I'm going to share with you some of other people's prediction, like Kathy Wood from ARK Invest. She remains extremely positive about Bitcoin, saying that it can hit over $1 million or more by 2030. And it is because of the fixed supply that makes it like digital gold that can perform during uncertainties. Michael Saylor, through his company MicroStrategy, calls Bitcoin the strongest long-term asset and expects massive gain over time. Banks like Standard Chartered and JP Morgan forecast 150,000, 300,000 possible by the end of 2026 in calmer scenarios, basically saying that if it is not calm, it could go even higher or it could go really badly. Some analysis points out that breaking and holding above $74,000 could lead to more upsides if trading volumes stay high. Though others warn of short pullbacks if big news turn negative, which is exactly what I said. If it goes steady, it will continue bouncing back from here on out. But if there's more negative news that would affect the entire economy, which, like I said before, Bitcoin actually often follows stocks instead of follow the trend of gold. So if there's more uncertainty, it will follow that uncertainty. And bears mentioned that there's a possible dip to 65,000 or 70,000 if the war headlines actually worsens, which is actually pretty possible. But overall, market feels pretty improved lately, so that's the good part. Well, in my opinion, Bitcoin is actually possible to be predicted. I'm not gonna say that you can exactly predict it, but I'm gonna say this. Some of the headlines are pretty obvious. Like, they took a nosedive from last year, but there's a lot of reasons that point towards why they took a nosedive and why Bitcoin ended up in such a bad situation. So in my opinion, if you see a good growth in Bitcoin and you see a war ahead, for example, that may actually be a good time to sell. Of course, some are just bluffs. You know, sometimes politicians like to play bluffs on war so that the market will fluctuate a little bit. However, if this war actually happens, I feel like if sometimes war actually happens like this scenario, it is pretty obvious that this would take a nosedive for market. So if you sell it and without trying to time it perfectly, you actually probably can buy at a lower price. But if you want to be safe, you can also not do that as well. In fact, you can just dollar cost average. Basically, if it took a dive, but you don't want to buy a higher price, but you also don't want to sell, then you keep the ones that you already bought, and you predict when it's gonna dip, and when it does dip, you don't have to take a risk of selling. You just buy more. So there's two ways to do it. Well, of course, you can choose the safe path, which actually safe path has proven that it probably has better results in the long term by many analysis. But if you're lucky and you're not, I guess, too egoistic to always aim for the exact dip, then you should be pretty fine, since Bitcoin has pretty obvious fluctuations, if you know what I mean. So bottom line, Bitcoin is not a instant get rich plan, but it does offer to preserve your money in the long term, especially from government controlled money systems, especially when those systems faces big stress or inflation or conflict. Owning a small amount, only what you can afford to lose, but honestly, in my opinion, you either invest what you afford to lose, or you invest using the money that you would treat something like a pension fund, like EPF or KWSP, right? So basically, this money, you're ready to not use it for a long time. then that's the money that you should invest in Bitcoin. But it does fluctuate very quickly. So if you want to keep track of it very tightly, you can go and use the live tracker like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, or Yahoo Finance for the exact numbers and the right this second. Well, it is pretty good, I would say. Bitcoin is actually proven over the last 15 years, 20 years that it is pretty reliable. I would say it has not crashed at all. I mean, I wouldn't say at all. I mean, like the system itself had not crashed. So I'll say if you give it even more time, the prices would be even higher and you would have missed out an opportunity. So if you have any hesitations to a Bitcoin, I think maybe potentially it's time to change. Don't take it as an advice. I'm just saying my own opinion. Well, that's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed this learning journey with me. If you do, like and subscribe. Watch the next one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.